You're listening to Unscripted Moments, a podcast about propaganda, hosted by two teachers who break down a different propaganda song each episode. Today we're talking about When All Your Fears Collide from Victory Lap, released September 29th, 2017 on Epitaph Records. This is our second discussion from Victory Lap. If you haven't heard our first one, go back and listen to the marvelous discussion we were able to have with Dr. Chris Deutsch on episode 3, where we broke down Cop Just Out of Frame.
All Your Fears Collide is one of the two songs on Victory Lap with Todd Kowalski, the bassist, on vocals. And because he sings less on this album, I think it actually makes these two songs, this and Negretto, really, really stand out. I mean, they're already excellent songs, but because they're the only two, I think that kind of makes me like them even more. And I'm predicting that today's guest feels the same way since he picked the song to talk about. We're going to chat with David Anthony, a podcast host and freelance music writer who's written about everything from Steve Albini, Pig Destroyer, Pearl Jam, Napalm Death, and of course, propaganda.
Awesome. Well, let's go hear what David Anthony has to say about this song, and then we'll be back later. So enjoy our conversation with David Anthony. David Anthony, welcome to Unscripted Moments, a podcast about propaganda. Thank you so much for being here.
I'm so happy to be here, guys. Thank you.
Can you just spend a moment and tell the audience who you are?
My name's David Anthony, as they just said. I co-host a podcast with my buddy Tim Crisp called As You Were, a podcast about Alkaline Trio, because all the best podcasts have a colon in the title, is my belief.
Woo!
But you know, I have both, over the past, I would say 12 years, both professionally, semi-professionally, been a music writer. When I say that, that includes like being, on staff. I was the music editor at AV Club for a few years. I'd worked there for like 5 years prior to that. I freelanced for a long time and still do. So for publications like NPR, Noisey, Vice, Bandcamp, the Chicago Reader, and then also do my own newsletter called Former Clarity, and that's just davidanthony.substack.com, which I haven't been super active with because in the moments that we've been living through these past few months, I've kind of, and it's been my same approach to freelancing recently, is like I kind of wanted to clear the way for the people who need that attention and oxygen a little bit. So yeah, that's been irregular, but I have some plans on stuff I want to do and bring that back. So yeah, writing, talking, telling people why they should or should not listen to certain pieces of music has kind of more or less been my bag for a while.
I love it. Well, David, I just have to give you some props here right off the bat, because it is because of your podcast with Tim Crisp, As You Were, a podcast about Alkaline Trio, that this idea came to me to ask Keith to do Unscripted Moments. So without As You Were, a podcast about Alkaline Trio, there is no me and Keith sitting here talking about propaganda. So I just have to encourage everybody out there to go check out your show as well, especially if you've listened to Alkaline Trio in the past, because your 100+ episodes going through the discography of Alkaline Trio was utterly inspiring to me to start this project that Keith and I have embarked upon here for ourselves.
Well, it's very flattering. I gotta say, like, I'm from when I found out this podcast existed, subscribed, listened, think it's great. So the fact that anything that he and I do talking about a much less learned band could inspire something of this caliber it's nice to know that the journey really does begin with the first step. So I'm glad that we could give something better than me just making Matt Skiba jokes to the world.
So David, what about your propaganda fan origin story? Like, what's the first album you heard? Did you hear from a friend? Tell us about your experiences listening to this band.
So I've been thinking about this a lot since you guys asked me to do it, and I know for a fact the first record I heard was Less Talk More Rock. I definitely didn't hear it when it came out because that was 96, correct?
Mm-hmm.
and I would have been 6 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So that would have been a little advanced in several ways. However, I did get into punk pretty young, and, music was always the thing I was really into. And like from the jump, my mom, my uncles, they were all very supportive. Like I would go to record stores with them. Like they would like buy me records, like basically every birthday, Christmas, I was just getting like music. Like that was kind of always the thing. So my mom had a copy of Green Day's Dookie when that came out. So I remember hearing that record, like not as me going to get it, but just like music I liked that was in the orbit. That then led to like Blink-182, that style of thing. And then by then, my one uncle kind of handed me down, like I remember the like starter pack he gave me, which was like the first Ramones record, first Clash record, and regrettably a Social Distortion record. But fine enough for a young, like I was probably like 9 or 10.
Yeah.
But by that point, I was using the internet more, digging around a lot more, trying to find new music. And I think I very quickly, like I knew who bands like NoFX and Bad Religion were. So I think it wasn't that big of a leap to find this. And then I think around the time Today's Empires was coming out, I was like, all right, like they've got a new record. I should get into this band. And I bought Less Talk More Rock, and the cover, like, I posted about this a few months ago, but just like, there are a lot of records that I could say influenced me and like changed my way of thinking, but that's the only album cover that's ever changed my way of thinking, where like it was, it just lays it all out there right on the cover, like, anti-fascist, pro-feminist, animal friendly, like all the way down. And then the booklet just being this insane list of references and the writings that they have in there. And the music just bowled me over. Like I never heard something that felt so confrontational yet educated and like enriching. It wasn't music that was confrontational and that it was trying to spit in your eye. It was trying to teach you how to spit in the eye of the oppressor. And then very quickly got Today's Empires, got How to Clean Everything, and then was just in. Like I was all in at that point. Like, and from there just continued falling down that kind of rabbit hole of political punk.
Nice. Did the gap between records make you only love them more? Because that's how I felt about it. I was like, whenever it was coming around, I was like, yes, it is time.
Yeah, I mean, it almost became mythical because they didn't tour a lot. Like at that time, you did not really, especially like I didn't get a chance to see them until Potemkin came out. And I have a very funny story about how I didn't actually see them until Supporting Cast came out.
Oh, God.
But, like when you only have so little material, especially in an era where everyone was operating on the like, it's either 18 months to 2 years, like new record, boom, 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 boom.
Yeah, Rancid.
And just all three of them sounded so different from one another that they were an early band for me where it was like, oh, I think up to that point, like a lot of the bands I was into were more codified. I knew what a Bad Religion record was going to sound like. I knew what a Green Day record was going to sound like. And, even Alkaline Trio, like that was a little weirder, and it was still kind of early on. But How to Clean Everything does not sound like Today's Empires.
No.
And, just the things that opened up for me, and like the bands they would reference were not, this wasn't, I don't know why I keep reaching to NoFX, but I guess I'm just trying to be accurate to the time. But this wasn't just him saying that like, oh, like Bad Religion and Rancid were the best bands ever. This was like, we're into Sacrifice and Venom and Final Conflict. And it's like, what? Okay, cool. Let's see what that's about. And I was just always that way where like, whatever band I liked, whatever bands they liked, I then tried to get those records.
Yeah. And I found SNFU and No Means No directly through Propaganda as well. So David, over the years, you've interviewed Propaganda, you've seen them, you've written about them. Can you tell me some stories about maybe like covering them, seeing them live? What jumps out to you about some specific, turning point memories that you have in your life with regards to this band?
So the first story I'll tell is that about the failed attempt to see them play for the first time.
Absolutely.
Which is It's so perfect. So I believe it was 2007 because it was after Potemkin came out, and they didn't like immediately tour on that record from my recollection, or like they did, but they did not come to Chicago, which would be my avenue in which to see them.
Yeah.
So when they did in 2007, they were playing the Abbey Pub, which no longer exists.
Yeah, I was at that show.
Well, you're gonna love this.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. So it was me, my best friend Ramuno, and my stepbrother Ryan, and we were like all like massive Propagandhi fans. And we're like, fuck, like we get to see Propagandhi. Now,
Finally.
the way we kind of operated, which is still kind of how I operate with some of my friends, is like we would like all kind of go to shows, but since like we were all like kind of broke kids, it's like, all right, I'll buy tickets to this one, and then you buy tickets to the next one, da 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 da. And I think Ryan was supposed to buy tickets to Propagandhi. And he was like, yeah, cool. Like, let's go. We like take the train from Indiana to Chicago, take the fucking, train up, get off, walk there, show up. And they're like, oh, what's the name on the tickets? And Ryan's just like, oh, I was just going to buy them at the door. They're like, it's sold out. And we were like, you fucking idiot. So we just like sat on the curb for a while, like waiting to see if anyone was going to sell tickets. No one did.
Of course.
And we just like dejectedly went home.
Oh.
Eventually saw Propagandhi on the Sporting Cast tour, but in terms of stories of interviewing them, the first time I interviewed them was when Supporting Cast came out. It was 2010, and they were playing a real weird show. It was a Riot Fest Presents show, but it was also in conjunction with Red Scare Records, which is the label that Toby Jag and Brennan Kelly run. And so the entire bill was like Red Scare bands and then Propagandhi. So it was like the Broke Downs and the Copyrights and Cobra Skulls, and I think Brendan played acoustic. And
amazing bands too.
Yeah, but like a weird bill for Propagandhi in that era, right? Yeah. And I was writing for a blog called Pop Stash that I started. Well, I didn't start, but was in on the ground floor with some friends I went to college with. It was a music blog. We like wrote reviews, did show things, did interviews, and I was like, I want to interview Propagandhi. And so like basically, I don't know if I just emailed them. I don't know if I had any publicist contacts, but just through some finagling was like, all right, you get to do an interview with them. And it was going to be both Chris and Todd. And we got there, they were totally game. And then it was like after sound check, and we did the interview outside the Metro, but like in that little space between Metro and G-Man for all you people who've been to the Metro, next to a dumpster. And it's just like me interviewing them for an hour. And it was the most intimidated I had ever felt.
Of course.
Going into an interview, because I was like, I'm fucking 20 years old.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I have to be with it. And I looked it back up, and it's not bad. Like I definitely cut out a lot for like word count constraints for some reason. But it was just capturing them in an interesting moment, because that record was out, and if the chips were down and I had to pick a favorite Propagandhi record, that might be my pick. But they were on, I think, Small Man Records for that, and then that label kind of fell away. And I was asking them a lot about, how they try to, like, what were they going to do? Like, were they going to fully start self-releasing? Like, what were they going to try and do with this thing that kind of had the wheels come off of it and kind of had this rug pulled out from under them by Fat? And it was like really intimidating to ask these guys these questions.
Absolutely.
But they were just unendingly kind, answered everything, like never treated any question like it was dumb. Just like the most, like, it's what you want out of that. Like I'm sure for them it was punishing and bad, but I had got no impression from them that that was the case.
Yeah. Did you record that, or were you just scribbling notes on a legal pad?
I had a little tape recorder, so that was resting on top of the dumpster we were next to.
Wow.
Because that's always my thing, is whenever I interview someone in person, and now I just use my phone, and like it's pretty common to have your phone just like resting on a table next to you. But I just always try to keep the recorder slightly out of sight. Yeah. Where it'll pick up well enough, because I'm the only one who needs to hear it. Right. Because I want them to just not just be talking to me. We're just having a conversation, and, not in some gotcha kind of way, but just like, I think it leads to a comfort that lets you kind of get the ball rolling a little quicker.
Awesome. Very cool. Did you preserve that cassette?
I'm sure I still have it. I mean, I save most all of my interviews and like try to keep a pretty thorough archive of things, because just like, I've got some interviews and stuff that like never even made it into print that like I love.
Yeah.
And it's just like, I don't know if I'll ever listen to them again. I don't know if I'll ever need them again, but like, I want to know it's there. Like, I want there to be that record, even if I'm the only one who knows that record exists.
Man, and I've told this on the show before, I think, but first of all, I had to offer a correction. So somebody emailed me and said that Propaganda didn't tour in St. Louis in 2005, which is when I first thought that I saw them. And they said that show at the new Creepy Crawl in St. Louis was actually 2007. So I have to do a little fact check and a correction from a previous episode, because I apparently did not see Propaganda in 2005 in St. Louis.
Well, it's funny because when you brought that up, I was like, man, I could have sworn it was like 2005 too, just because I think I'm so used to the tours happening the year the record comes out. Like the fact they didn't do a run through this area, because I think they only did like a Canadian tour, maybe some Northeast with that, but I think they only did a West Coast tour in 2005 for the record. So it's like,
wow.
I was doing some looking that stuff up because I was like, man, like I could have sworn this was in 2005, and I was like, fuck, it was 2007. And like, even then it was like they were doing like a week of dates in like May of 2007.
Yeah, that was when I first saw the Beef too.
Yeah.
So David, Propaganda started. I want to talk a little bit about eras here really quick. They started and became popular in like a pre-internet world, like before our information moved at like a mile a minute. And so I feel like I'm noticing a difference in Propaganda's like lyrical content as they've moved into like the internet world where things move so fast.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any thoughts or reflections on, the transition of Propaganda from like a 90s pre-internet band to today with Twitter scrolling past our retinas full speed ahead? Like, do you see any shift in the band over these eras as we've gotten into our modern times?
Well, I do, and I think that can most accurately be summed up with the fact that I believe currently their Twitter bio, and I might have this paraphrasing slightly wrong, but I believe it just says, "See, we tried to tell you." And that's something when I interviewed Chris in 2017 for the Victory Lap record, that was something that was kind of weighing heavily on me, because getting into them, while the internet was, it's not what it is now. Like this type of conversation with the three of us in different locations, being able to see each other and record this in high def would like not have existed when this band was beginning to catch on.
Yeah.
And I think as a result of that, I feel like the cultural conversation moved a lot slower. And what I mean by that is, I have a very vivid memory of September 11th and the day we bombed Iraq. They're pretty etched into my brain. And by that point, because of getting into a lot of punk and a lot of hardcore, I was already becoming pretty politically charged. Like the first Noam Chomsky book I read was Hegemony or Survival, which I think came out in 2003, maybe 2002. So I was 12 or 13. I was like very disillusioned, right? And for me, you really didn't know where a lot of the like being into punk, you kind of get an idea of where the bands you like stand. Like, I have a pretty good idea of what Millions of Dead Cops think.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of gray area, right? Because I didn't really know anyone who is like, yeah, George Bush fucking sucks. Like I had to hear that through music really first. And then as I started reading more and more, unfortunately hidden, American history, going through things like, People's History of the United States or Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee, and just trying to take in as much as I could, I felt like everything progressed so much slower. Whereas now, and I think this is true of even, 2016, 2017, is the dialogue, the discourse, the evolution of what these conversations are can change in a day, can change in a week, and in a month it's already over, for good and bad. And, you know, Propaganda making a record like Let's Talk More Rock, which was very much anchored in its time and place, you can't really do that anymore without it feeling immediately dated. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but I think it's really hard to put out a record that is addressing a conversation that already ended 3 months ago. You know, just the nature of record cycles. And when I interviewed Chris for that piece in Noisey, one of the things that I really wanted to talk to him about, and like, you know, I have a little bit of regret about that because I reread that piece recently and I'm very proud of how it came out. But I think one of the things I really wanted to drive home was that, like, they've been doing this for so long and now they are existing in a world where there are more, you know, people of color in punk bands singing about their unique experience. Whereas I think for a lot of people, propaganda, I don't know which way we fall on that line. I think for a lot of people, myself included, opened my eyes to a lot of that stuff. And I think there's importance in that. And I think there's a real, you know, I think that music still holds up. I think those politics are still very sound. And I think Victory Lap and even Failed States to a degree, they're more subtle because they're stories that really take some time, I think, to decipher the meaning. They aren't they aren't doing that song about, you know, a Shell executive and just using his dialogue as lyrics. They're writing songs that are, you know, like Cop Just Out of Frame or Comply Resist, and these things that are a little more textural, and I think shows that they are looking inward to challenge themselves. And I don't know if I saw that as much in Victory Lap when that came out. And that's, you know, that's really my own failure. But I think that's what's changed. I feel like they are, you know, interrogating themselves as much as they are interrogating the outside world. And I think that's something that only really comes from people who have been in the fight a long time. And I think it's why their music has aged very well, is because, you know, they aren't, when they're putting a real fine point of something, like let's say Iteration, you know, the closing track off Potemkin, or like even Super Old Patriot or Speculative Fiction. I don't know why I'm only picking songs from this record. But like those songs have like kind of very specific references to George Bush and Donald Rumsfeld, but they almost play out like, hey, you need to remember this now. At the moment, those were very clever, incisive, and insightful critiques. But now it's a reminder, especially as we're living in a moment where George W. Bush is being like
whitewashed,
rehabilitated
for sure.
You need to hear that. And like, for me, like that kind of, I think the change for me came in on Potemkin, which I guess I'll just really lay it on that record. Like, it was the difference between the Let's Talk More Rock era or even today's Umpires with songs like Fuck the Border, and then a song like Bringer of Greater Things, which I know you guys talked about recently. And like, I remember hearing that song for the first time and reading the lyrics and just fucking crying. Like, that song like hit me in such a deep way because it was so human. And it was, they really started exploring less of the issue and more of the human cost as we've moved into this era. And I think that's something that gets lost in the current discourse that plays out in media, in Twitter, and that's through no fault of any one person or any institution. But, you know, I think that's what makes their stuff really stand out for me, is that they've grown with it, but they've never been trying to directly be a response to it. And I think that's been very important.
So, David, let's dive a little further then into a song from Victory Lap to see how this discourse, the lyrics, like all of those things have evolved. When we asked you to pick a few songs, you selected When All Your Fears Collide as one, a Todd song from Victory Lap. Why did you choose that track?
So I chose this track because, as I was saying, like, I put this record on a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago now, after not listening to it for a little while, which is, I will say, not a judgment on the record, but whenever I write a piece about a band, I go so deep into the record. Like if I'm reviewing it or writing a profile like that, I live in it for so much time in such a short period of time that I always kind of have to step away because, I just need a break. So, I've listened to the record a few times since then, but it just hit me in such a fresh way. And when that song came on, I was just like, man, I remember loving this song. I kind of forgot about it, not in a bad way, like not to like, I think this song is fucking brilliant. But there were so many moments in it that just hit me. And there's a part specifically that happens right around the 2-minute mark where the entire thing kind of opens up and the melodic lead shifts and Todd reaches for different notes and sings a little more melodically and higher, where it's just like, it just felt like a same thing with like Bringer of Greater Things, like a punch in the gut of just like them distilling all this anger and frustration into this moment of like, just like cathartic release. And it's a song that I think lyrically speaks to kind of what I was saying, is like, it's very ambiguous and I think it can be read a lot of different ways. So I don't want to put a prescriptive meaning on it, but I think it speaks really well to where I think all of us currently sit right now. But what I take from it is also a very interesting kind of observation about the people on the other side. And I can get into that more if you'd like, or I can leave room for you guys to follow up.
Yeah, and when All Your Fears Collide is on Victory Lap, and when that record was coming out, I know that you wrote a piece that you've mentioned, and you wrote in the piece that the band seems to see it as their, quote, job to force introspection in the listeners that think listening to propaganda is the end of their duty as an activist. And I really liked that line from your piece. And so, because of this, we have to process the words and ideas being presented in songs. And instead of just like thinking nice platitudes and things like that, use them for a different effect. And this song, to me, I feel like we have a future staring us in the face in this song. Do you know what I mean? Like, I feel like we're looking down the road in the not too distant future into something ugly. So like maybe in broad strokes, I'm curious what this song makes you feel and what you think about what this is saying about the world, and also maybe any of your favorite lines that may jump out at you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think what this song says to me, and I think why it hits harder than it did in 2017, where obviously things are bad. Obviously, like, things like Black Lives Matter, things like indigenous people's resistance movements, like all the, women's right to choose, there were an innumerable amount of issues happening in that year. And I think that was also really, it was not the year it started, because I believe it was 2006 or 2008, but 2017 was the year the Me Too movement really got legs under it. And so I think there's a lot of things happening and a lot of discussions that felt very fractured, right? Like they weren't aligned. And I think what this song hits on for me is that, no, these things do not exist in vacuums. They all converge. They all exist from the same root causes of oppression, injustice, and, just pure ugliness and hatred. And I think we are currently, hearing this song on a record literally as I was in my bedroom, like quarantined, and then like having to, I went out to a few marches and demonstrations, and I've been kind of quietly doing this because I don't like patting myself on the back for stuff, but I've been like selling records online and using that money to donate to causes, and I've been trying to put a lot of my energies there. And I think what this song said to me that really hit me and kind of cracked me open and made me very emotionally vulnerable in that moment was that, like, everything I ever believed about the failures of this country, about the failures of people, are confirmed. Everything that you knew it, but you held out hope that people were better than this. You held out hope that people in positions of power would do the right thing, would make the right choice, would make the ethical choice. They won't. And I think that's what really hit me with the song, and to focus on one specific line, which I'll quote here. It's right near the end of the song, and Todd says, "All along they made you think that you would be the wolf this time. Their shadows stalk you endlessly." And what I really like about that line, and that kind of hits on what I was alluding to, is I feel so much that that is a line focused on the people. I would say people in law enforcement, people in the military, people who have this idea that they're the ones who are like this lone wolf who's protecting everyone, who is out here to, maintain order and, uphold this beautiful country they love so much. And you're just being exploited. It almost feels like that's the moment where the things he's singing about before that is like pulling the wool away from the person's eyes, and now they can see what was before them. And I think that nature of exploring fear is so telling, because you see so much racism, hatred, oppression brought out by fear that turns to hatred and anger and much, much uglier things. And I think so many people are wrapped up in their fear that they can't see the thing for what it actually is. And presenting that as a moment where all these things come together and literally collide, you're kind of presented with the fact that you have to deal with the things that, like, you can't just go about your day and, pop over to the store and buy some stuff, because that's not an ethical decision. Everything you're doing is, everything that I've been able to achieve in my career is I've benefited from white supremacy, even though I decry that institution. And this is a song that I think for me just really locked into me in that moment and made me realize that, like, there is no passive decision when you're talking about these things. So took that in a long-winded, lot of different ways. Sorry about that, but that's what this one kind of hit.
It reminds me of like the last line of Resisting Tyrannical Government, about opposing the system that benefits you. But then also, so like that happening in 1996, but then this song being released in 2017. So there's like decades separating those two songs, and realizing that all the things that you had hoped for in 96 have only gotten worse in 2017. So it's like a nice little bookend to me in my mind.
I agree completely.
So one thing that I've noticed since we started this project is how much the band is able to connect their lyrics and the music conceptually. And maybe if I noticed that for a few songs before, I don't think I picked it up for as many of it, like for all the songs we've talked about so far. So just kind of thinking and switching to the music here, you wrote in 2014, you said, "This is not to say there's a right or wrong way for a band to go about serving a song. But for my money, there's nothing better than a band going for broke and making each member's movements serve the guitar line. And if there's one band that gleefully gives itself to these type of moments, it's Canada's Propaganda." So how does that analysis and that observation fit into this song?
Boy, my writing back then was not nearly as good as it is now. But
we love the article, David.
Thank you. I mean, the point of that is something that, I do think about a lot, and it is something that I've thought about a lot the last 5 years. As I think as we all do, there are certain things that you're into that you grow away from, and you get into new stuff, yada, yada, yada. But I think what really speaks to me about their music in particular, and what makes them so singular, is that everyone is playing every moment like it is the most important moment of the song. Everyone in this band, there is no part any one of them is playing that feels like they're on autopilot. Everything is always a 100% commitment. And I think when I said that, I think what I meant most truly is that, they are very much a guitar-driven band. But I think the way that Todd undercuts that, and I think especially the way Jord plays his parts, where it's so influenced by, 80s thrash and early death metal stuff, where drum fills are meant to play along with a very kind of staccato riff and hit, just syncopate with it, hit crashes at the end of phrases, like, you know, just really play into it. It gives everything a very unique push that I think in a lot of punk and hardcore you don't often get. I've been using this line a lot the last few years, and it's like the difference between punk and metal is that, or like punk and hardcore and metal on the two different camps. With punk and hardcore, everyone's waiting for the moment where you get to sing the thing, and in metal, everyone's waiting for the moment where you feel the thing with the music. And Propaganda is directly in the middle. They do both. And I think those are the bands that are most interesting. And I think that's kind of what I was saying with Victory Lap, is like, it took me a little bit, but now I see it all so clearly. I see what those movements are supposed to be clearer than I did 3 years ago. And, you know, that's ultimately one of the failures of journalism and criticism, is that you often have to deal with it in the moment. And I think a lot of these songs really opened up for me once I saw them play some of them live on that tour. And, you know, that's also one of the problems where, like, you're writing a thing before an album's out. So there's certain transcendental things that happen with music that you miss. But I think they just have such an artful way of being aggressive, of being thoughtful, and being emotional, all in the same song and at drastically different times. And I think that's only achieved by every member, you know, and Sulin being the new member on this record, and the Beeve as well, who's no longer with them. Like, I think all of them had this very strong understanding of, like, this is what this moment needs to express, and now we are going to express it. And, you know, I think the failure that I see in a lot of modern punk bands is it's just like, well, it's just kind of verse, chorus, bridge, chorus out. And you can't really map a lot of their songs that way. They have those elements, but they are always coming in through the side door. And I think that is just a really compelling thing to hear in music.
Yeah. Well, and when we interviewed Ben Murray from Heart Sounds, he described that style of their writing very well as well. I really like the way you described that, of like coming in the side door, as opposed to that very cookie cutter standardized way of putting together a song that, like, I could grab the Stratocaster off my wall here in front of me and I could put together a bridge, or a verse, chorus, bridge out, or whatever like that. You know, I could do it. I could string it together. And, you know, but this song, When All Your Fears Collide, is so interesting because this is a song that I've never seen them perform live before, you know, and to me, this was a song that, like, I hadn't really thought about a whole lot lately. And because for me, I tend to get that moment where I feel the thing, like you were mentioning, when I see Propaganda play songs live on a tour, especially post Today's Empires, Tomorrow's Ashes, because that's a record that, like, grabbed me, like, right in the heart straight away, because it's so aggressive, and that's where my tastes and everything was at that period of time. Like, I could just go for all the riffs on that record and I was hooked right away. But every record since, except for Supporting Cast, that one grabbed me too. But I needed to see it live. I needed to see Failed States live. I needed to see Potemkin live in order to understand fully what was happening. And this is one I haven't seen yet. So yesterday I was scouring YouTube, and I came across a performance of this tune shot from a balcony, so it's looking down on them. And I sent it to you guys also to watch it too, because I wanted to direct your attention to George specifically on this track, because it brought my attention and my appreciation for this track to a brand new level, seeing George perform it. I'm curious if you can speak at all to the feel of the drums on this record, the parts, and how you feel about, like, the percussion going on behind it, because it is wild when you see it compared to when you hear the studio version.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with that. I think this is one that really benefits from that. And I would say George's playing, you feel it on the record, but I think it really comes across live how lumbering and hulking his parts are. He's almost kind of playing behind the beat on the snare just a little bit to give it this feel like everything's lurching forward. Like you're kind of thrusting with your shoulders, you know, to get your upper part leading instead of your legs, right? Like it just has this really lurching quality in the first half of it,
Yeah.
where like those riffs are so big, so he's just like really swinging the bat extra hard trying to knock it out of the park. And I think that really adds to it because it gives it this weird kind of stutter step almost, where it almost feels like the rhythm is deliberately kind of jerking you back and forth, which I love. I think it's one of those moments that just like, you know, it really feels like a classic Todd composition in terms of how he writes riffs, but supplanted with this very masterful, almost like discordant approach to how the rhythm section follows him, with the rhythm section being Jord, and him too, I guess, but he wrote the fucking song. And I think what really makes this song hit home for me, which is jumping ahead a little bit here, is that this is a pretty like ugly, uncomfortable, heavy song in a way that a lot of songs aren't traditionally heavy. You know, this isn't like a blast beat laden thing. It's not a like doom composition where George's leaving a lot of space between notes. He's filling up that space, but he's keeping it very clean. It doesn't feel busy, but you see him play and you're like, whoa, there's a lot of precision going on. And those decisions feel deliberate. But there's the moment right around the 2-minute mark where he's kind of retaining that pace, but everything else pulls back. The guitars pull back. And, you know, I don't know if it's just Chris or Sulin or if this is a song the Beef played on, but that really ascendant melodic guitar line comes in and Todd really opens up. He's being a little more burly and aggressive up front and then switches to really singing those words, singing the title of the song. And it's heartbreaking to me because to what we were saying about the lyrics, I feel like it's just, like I said, you know, so much of the song is kind of being a barrage of these feelings and these concepts and these ideas, you know, and then you have the moment where, like I said, like the blindfolds are moved and then you actually see everything for what it is. And it's a really beautiful moment to me because they're kind of doing something that I think is really hard to do in a song without doing something very glaringly coy, like a key change or like a stop start kind of thing, and really going into a second half a la like a Kid Dynamite or something. I think they're just, you know, to use an analogy that I did not come up with, and all credit goes to the great Tim Barry. I interviewed him years ago, and he said to me that he's like, I don't think of songs in chords. I think of them in colors. And he's like, when I'm writing a song, he's like, if a song is making me feel a little blue, that's what the lyrics come out as. If a song is making me feel gray, that's what the lyrics come out as. If a song is making me, you know, so on and so forth. And I feel like what this song is doing is it's painting with all these very drab, dark colors, you know, reds, browns, just like really oppressive things. And then it opens up to this really beautiful thing that's only faintly present in the distance at the very end. It's offering you the reality and the optimism at the same time, but making you feel like it's just out of reach. And I think that's, to me, what, you know, there's so many great songs that both Todd and Chris have written over the years, but this is one that, like, the past few weeks I've just been listening to endlessly for those reasons.
So David, on a more personal note, if you don't mind sharing, how has this band served you during, you know, the pandemic, during the last couple months of uncertainty, of fear, of isolation, but also of like just constantly, you know, overwhelming and oppressive news? Like, has this band come back to you in any other way?
I mean, I think they've become a touchstone for me with certain people I know, because like there are people I know who also share this way, like people I would say who come from punk or hardcore or whatever, who have just been like, well, yeah, all the shit we've always been saying is just now like, I had this conversation with my friend Dan once where we were just like, isn't it weird that all this stuff that made us like fucking isolated weirdos in high school is now just like a normal opinion to have? Like, that's kind of good, you know? And unfortunately, it may not be the dominant opinion, but it is becoming an increasingly normal one.
Yeah, it's progress before your eyes.
Exactly. And like, it's hard not to feel optimistic at like going to a protest with 30,000 people, everyone wearing masks, being respectfully distanced, and just like fucking for it. And seeing artists, doing charity shirts, donating money, doing everything they can, people I knew doing the same things. Like it's a really beautiful thing to see. But I think one of the things that I initially was having a trouble with, and this is kind of before the reignited spark in Black Lives Matter, but with the COVID situation and the isolation, is like I do well on my own. I live with my girlfriend. We have a roommate. That's all hunky dory. But I was just seeing so many people on my street, people I know, who would post very self-righteous things and then do the opposite. And I was just being confronted a lot by that inherent hypocrisy that, everyone has to a degree. I don't think there's any truly pure version of living in the modern world that doesn't make you kind of backpedal on some beliefs you hold. But, seeing that, and I was getting kind of hot about it. And then I was just like putting on propaganda records, and I was putting on propaganda records, and like, as corny as it sounds, just crying to some of those songs because it was just like, like I was saying, like this one or Bringer of Greater Things, and the song whose title I always have trouble pronouncing, which is the first song on Today's Empires. Like there was just a lot of moments where I was seeing like, oh, these are things that I've known about for 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
These are things that I've always cared about. And at times I have allowed myself to be quieter about them for the sake of polite company. And now just being like, well, fuck that forever, And it's just like, it's nice to have something that I can reach to that feels like a bellwether of good, that like doesn't feel like I have to make any explanations for why this thing is good, and can give me that emotional catharsis through music and sometimes lyrics, but also challenge me to really look inward and question these systems, to question these things about myself, and to question myself to do better. And that's a lot of work, which is why people don't always do it, but I find hope in that. And like I think that is what I've gotten more than anything, is that like this band, for all the ugliness that they are observing and pointing out, I do think is inherently hopeful. Chris would maybe disagree with like the last song on Victory Lap being about essentially how we're all animals in our own cages. But I think we're seeing some of the realities a lot more. And, the fact that like my mom, my stepbrothers, people who I think were very much lulled into complacency under the Obama administration are like posting shit where I'm like, oh, good. Love to see that. Like, it's nice to see people who I think, you always kind of worry, like, do the people that I am related to, or the people that maybe I'm close to, who we've never had these conversations with, like, are we on the same page? And at the very least, I've gotten confirmation that at least most of the people are, and that's something good.
Well, and the agony that one feels when you realize that they're not all on the same page is extremely real across this country right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's brutal. And like, seeing the fact that like, I don't want to publicly dig up some stuff that I know has been causing some of my friends particular harm, but a friend of mine who owns a business in Northwest Indiana made a fairly innocuous post about Black Lives Matter, and then was catching a lot of flack. And as I said to him, I was like, well, if they ever do anything, me and all of Antifa are coming back, and we're gonna join arms in front of your business and home. And it sucks to see that certain people have to deal with those reactions, but I think those are these conversations need to be started. And I think people who are in certain places have never had to have it challenged. And I think I've just kind of been in the mindset over the last few months, like, all right, I'm willing to have these conversations. Like, I'll talk to anybody about it if they want, because I have my beliefs. I'm very firm in them, but I will just ask them why, until they realize they don't actually have a answer that's grounded in reality. And then we can start doing something about that.
I love it. Well, David, as I mentioned at the very top of this conversation with you, I love what you have done with As You Were with Tim Crisp. And you guys are over 100 episodes now into your podcast, and that's about as many podcasts as Keith and I plan to do about Propaganda. What have you learned over the course of the past couple of years being 100 plus episodes deep into a podcast about a single band's catalog?
I mean, what I think you'll learn, and I think you guys are going to have a lot better of a time with us than us, where when we hit that roulette wheel and you have like 3 songs in a row that you don't particularly care for, that's a rough day, given how we record. So you aren't going to have that problem.
Yeah.
But I do think what I've learned, and what has made it so fulfilling, is that like, I think most people genuinely connect to music on a very deep level and want to have conversations about it. And that's awesome.
Yeah.
Like, that's been something that's been so heartening, and to like really dig into something where it's like, you know, I think whether it's Alkaline Trio or Propaganda, whatever band, if you ask me why I like them, I could give you a 5-minute long answer, but we've been talking for an hour.
Yeah.
About a song, essentially.
Right.
And you really are forced to articulate why things matter to you, and you'll have your own little epiphanies of like, you're just starting to say something, or something pops into your head because, you know, one of you will say something to the other, and you're like, whoa, I this thing just crashed into me about why I like this so much. And that's awesome. Like, it's such an amazing feeling. And it's something that I've only ever really gotten from music. It's why my entire life has been built around it, for better and often for worse.
Yeah. Well, and what's so interesting about your show too is you guys openly state clearly when you don't like something.
Yes.
And I noticed that you get like the bad reviews come in on iTunes. You know what I mean? And like, it's because you're hitting somebody right in their heart with something that is a piece of art that connected with them but didn't connect with you, and then they're like going to make you pay the price. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a tough thing. And because that's the thing, is I never want to shit on people for their taste or the things they like unless it's something that I actually believe is damaging, to society or them.
Yeah.
I'm not really going to be like, fuck you, you shouldn't do this. The only times I've done that is like, you know, right before I left AV Club 3 years ago, was like, I wrote a big piece about NSBM, which is National Socialist Black Metal. And I was basically like, hey, fuck all these bands and fuck all these labels that are cool with it, and fuck these festivals who are cool, you know. And boy, that is still a thorn in my side of my life. But south of that, you're probably fine. But I also think it's important to be authentic. I think it's important for me to, the difficulty is because Tim and I both don't like some of those things. And because I think we're both pretty voracious music listeners, it's hard. Sometimes it's unendingly frustrating to hear a song that's 3.5 minutes long, and you're just like, after the first 18 seconds, you're like, well, I know exactly what happens from beginning to end. Like, this sucks. And I don't ever want to shit on anyone's taste. I think that's really callous and unnecessary. I understand why people get mad, but I'd like to think that we've softened a little bit on how we approach that to accommodate, and hopefully people have softened on their opinions of us.
David, that's awesome. And as someone who's been reading your music writing for a while, you know, someone who can write about Napalm Death to Pearl Jam, you know, you're a really talented, you're a great, you're a talented writer, and
thank you.
To know your work and then find out that we know some of the same people, and then finally be able to talk about one of our shared favorite bands is really awesome. Where can people find you online if they want to check out your work?
Well, thank you both. This has been great. Genuinely a huge pleasure for me. If you want to find me, just head to Twitter. That is @dbanthony. My email's there. Everything else is linked. If you want to email me and you're mad about something, by all means, you have every right to.
Keith, what did you enjoy about our chat with David Anthony?
Well, I think because he has been a fan of the band for much longer and through different parts of his life, I think his description of their evolution as becoming less issue based and more based in humans, I thought that was just like a really insightful observation, and it really rings true. And I do think that idea is reflected in his review of Victory Lap, which I totally recommend giving a read. And the other thing I think about this song that really came to mind and like I visualized for When All Your Fears Collide is when he talks about like this blindfold coming off of whomever is being addressed, or the listener in this part of the song. And maybe a cheesy connection, but in this almost like Wizard of Oz door opening from this bland, drab colors all of a sudden to these colors that are almost blinding. As he was describing it, that's the visualization I had. And he's such a talented music writer. He in the moment made me think about a song differently, even though I wasn't even hearing it. I was just hearing him talk about it. What about you? What stood out about his conversation?
So the thing that most stood out to me is how when he said something along the lines of how we've held out hope for years and years that our leaders would do better.
Mm-hmm.
And the sickening, stomach churning realization that just simply isn't going to happen. And, I find myself devolving into cynicism involving like this entire upcoming year that we're currently living through.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever I hear people say things like trying to put a positive spin on stuff, and I'm like, oh yeah, just wait until XYZ happens. And I find myself like always, springboarding to terrible outcomes.
Yeah.
To outcomes like described in this song where, it's essentially pandemonium in the streets and you feel like you're being chased by something horrible and you're fumbling for your keys in your doorway, and how, your whole life you have ignored problems that were staring you in the face and you never did anything about it. And now it has come for you. And no one has stopped this horrible thing from coming for you. You just hoped that they would, and they have completely let you down and failed you. That's what really, jumps out to me is like David made me kind of be able to, a little more succinctly explain what I felt about that.
Yeah, I think each of us might have a different interpretation when it comes down to like the specifics, but there's like a common thread that definitely ties each of our ideas together, I'm guessing. And so I think with Todd songs, typically they're less cryptic, right? They're usually not as open to interpretation as some of the songs penned by Chris. They're typically narratives about human suffering, hitting bottom. And this seems to be one of, if not the most symbolic songs that Todd has written. And I think my first impression hearing this is like it's a more dramatic and serious version of This Is Your Life off of Supporting Cast, which is just a straight up ripper. It's an in-your-face hardcore punk rager. It kind of rails against the sort of suburban, middle-aged, middle-class boredom, like a meaningless existence that's been manipulated, maybe by politicians, maybe by advertisers, channeling like personal frustrations and failure against a perceived enemy abroad. So like I get this connection with that. And I read the song in a similar way, but the subject of the song is someone struggling with like their past actions, not so much because the person regrets them, but because they're finally being held accountable. And so a friend pointed out like the you in this song seems purposefully vague. And at first I kind of thought of it as maybe someone suffering from PTSD, like a veteran. Then I thought that was maybe too easy or obvious. And then I thought like this sort of class commentary with an Ebenezer Scrooge-like character who's profited from other suffering and, never got the ghost to visit and never got this chance at redemption. But the repetition of fears, when all your fears collide, coming back and like hearing that again, I couldn't help but think like, well, what fears motivate someone to take extreme action today? And to me, like interpreting this in like the moment in the last several years, I see this as like a song about someone who has joined some like extremist militia group or a hate-based group rooted in some hateful ideology, and they've committed acts of violence or terrorism against the public. So breaking down and to explain how I interpret or why I interpret it with some of the lyrics, it says, neighbors are racked with distress, ecstatic crowds burn a man alive. So I see society is like breaking down amid like these mass protests due to racial, social, and economic inequality. But the subject, the you in the song, is too afraid to face the real change that's coming. Or when Todd sings, your final offering is a tragedy that haunts you deep in the night. To me, like the person never really made amends for whatever they've done. And the only atonement seems to be like their own suffering. And then coming back to the title, I think the fears can be either like the ghosts of this person's victims, but also like the fears harbored by a person, but also the fears harbored by the person at the center of the song, which could be immigrants, racial minorities, or religious minorities. And that line, it will rise over ruin. To me, like there's like this race war that white nationalists have hoped to trigger, and it's backfired, and these people are on the run. And the real reason why I interpret this song this way is because of my favorite line in this in the song. All along, they made you think that you would be the wolf this time. And I think of a wolf as a predator. Also, the terminology of lone wolves kept popping into my head while reading this. And, the quote unquote, they made the quote unquote, you feel powerful and justified in action. So whether they is like the Proud Boys or, some message board or a copy of the Turner Diaries that's manipulated some weak and scared and hateful person to take action. Regardless, the song to me is about someone who's been manipulated through their fears, manipulated through things that they don't understand. And all of those things kind of are like, crashing back at them. And it could be that, reading the historian Kathleen Ballou's book, Bring the War Home. I read this just last summer, and this book is incredibly eye-opening in that she argues that we've misinterpreted hate groups in thinking that they're inept and, they're ignorant, racist hillbillies, and we think of them as disparate, disconnected groups, whereas they are actually tied together. And because we've underestimated them in a way, they've grown in population, they've grown in their messaging, and now evolved their messages online. This book has really hit me pretty hard reading it within the last year, and I think I keep coming back to it. So this could be maybe the worm that makes me interpret this song in a way that I'm predicting is going to be pretty different from how you see it.
Oh man, and that's really interesting. And another text that springs to mind when you were talking about the things that makes these theys you mentioned feel justified is the protocols of the elders of Zion, which has been used to perpetuate anti-Semitic tropes and to instigate violence against Jewish people for a long time now. It's really interesting the way that text can get inside people's heads to validate their preconceived notions and everything that makes them feel afraid, so that they feel like they have to lash out against it.
So I'm guessing your interpretation's different. What do you got? What do you think?
Okay, so I definitely am hearing this song in a different way. Like I feel like you're connecting it more to like the world that we live in now, and I'm connecting it to the world that we might yet inhabit in the not too distant future. So for me, this is like literary speculative fiction, a la Propaganda. I feel like, the song speculative fiction is important to consider here as well, because Chris is sort of describing this, this issue that we face within that song. And speculative fiction, to me, is work that talks about things that we can already do, technologies that already exist, issues that already exist, and it is a conclusion that might be reached based on the trajectory that we're currently on, right?
Yeah.
So that differs from sci-fi, which talks about things that we can't yet do. So for me, this song is like a speculative fiction track. So I've got some ideas here that I'm gonna go through as well as I can. So my favorite line of the song is the opening. So it starts off, "When all your fears collide, you'll watch the sun rise, but it will rise over ruin, unveiling your crimes, observing the depth of your failure." So, for their entire career, Propaganda have been discussing making our planet better for everyone. In one of their earlier songs, they said, "Make this shithole planet better."
Yeah.
In time, And I was thinking about this the other day, and I remember meeting the writer Naomi Klein a couple years ago, and she was supporting this book, "This Changes Everything: Capitalism versus the Climate." And at her talk, she described 2017 as being like our year zero for our ability to manage climate change disaster. And, year after year passes and we careen through catastrophe after catastrophe, climate disaster after disaster. Everyone is still driving, flying, scarfing cheeseburgers and soda and Funyuns. We we're like allowing storms to worsen, seas to acidify, temperatures to rise. For example, in Buffalo, where I live, barely anybody has air conditioning, but it's been an absolute inferno this summer,
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So this is like, we're watching the depth of our failure in real time, And there's another line. This line, "You'll watch the sun rise, but it will rise over ruin, unveiling your crimes, observing the depth of your failure." It also reminds me of one of my favorite books, Oryx and Crake by Margaret Atwood. So, like in this book, the main character, his name is Snowman, aka Jimmy, and in the book, he's like living in a tree in like a post-pandemic disaster world. And he's like surveying the damage of a world run entirely by corporate overseers who live inside walled compounds. The world has been overrun by a pandemic where the haves and the have-nots live in segregated compounds for the rich. And then like out in like the wastelands of what's left of society, which Atwood refers to as the plebe lands, they're like overrun by crime, sickness, and disease in a world where I feel Todd is describing in the track. So I see Snowman in the book observing the depths of human failure. And the backstory in the novel shows Jimmy and his buddy Glenn when the world was devolving. And they're just like watching porn, playing video games, getting high inside their like privileged lives while watching catastrophe after catastrophe ricochet around them. And they just keep doing what they were doing. And when I was thinking about this today, I was like, are we not just doing that right now?
Yeah.
So that was like a really big connection for me when thinking about that.
So that's so funny. If our brains are wired differently, if I just tend to think in more of a literal way to where it has to be connected to something specific versus this bigger picture. But I think that connection with their already established tendency to write in a speculative fiction narrative, I think that totally fits as well. And it also really closely mirrors what David Anthony was saying.
Yeah. And I don't make those kinds of connections with every propaganda song. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
It's just that with this imagery in this particular song and the vividness of the novel Oryx and Crake, but I mean, you can do this with a bunch of other novels. Like I can easily make these types of connections with another amazing novel, A Canticle for Leibowitz by Walter M. Miller Jr. Um, that is the same thing. It's the same vivid imagery. And so anyway, so next, like, here's another lyric I like. When all your fears collide, you're stumbling on this waste of life over top of once breathing warning signs. And this one just like lit me up too.
Yeah.
So like,
I didn't even touch that one because I had no idea.
Oh man. So like Atwood, who wrote Oryx and Crake, about like bioengineering technologies that already exist. And she like describes a scenario in which they're pushed to the extreme. Explained, so Margaret Atwood said, we are simply, what if we continue down the road we're already on? How slippery is the slope? What are our saving graces? Who's got the will to stop us? Mm. So like, just because we can do something, what are the bioethics behind it? Just because we can, should we? It's a question like philosophers have long asked. And I think this tune is Todd's Oryx and Crake, essentially. He's Jimmy slash Snowman in the novel watches the sun rise over the ruins of human failure. So to me, this song is Todd's Oryx and Crake,
If I had the chance to talk with him, I don't think I would ask him. I think maybe I would say, hey, here's my 90-second thought, and that's it. But there's so much more to take away in a conversation about what it could mean rather than just what it literally means. So I think that's.
And so like people listening to this may completely 100% disagree with my interpretation of it. And I am totally okay with that.
Tell us what you think.
Yeah. One of my favorite things about this show so far has been when people have like sent in little corrections about something that I've gotten wrong. Like I mentioned earlier when David was on, and also things like informing me of John K. Sampson's demo tape from 1993, which had Greenest Eyes on it as a standalone track, which I didn't even know existed. So like I'm learning stuff about this band all along the way that I had no idea even existed.
Yeah, I'm starting to realize that there are far more credentialed super fans out there who are on the other side of this microphone who probably should be talking into it instead.
Yeah. And, that's why I love having guests on, because there are people that I'm learning so much from. And so keep those comments coming, keep everything coming. We're loving it. We're loving hearing from you. But anyway, so my last lyric that I love is all along they made you think that you would be the wolf this time. And I know that you talked about that line. David talked about that line. And I have a slightly different take on it. So to me, this makes me think about the moment we're living through with the global pandemic and the utter failure of the United States leaders and people. Not all people. Many people are doing incredible jobs to stem this pandemic from overtaking our lives for years to come. And I applaud those efforts of the people who are doing the right thing. And to me, we are witnessing firsthand the direct result of educating generations of young people to think they are growing up in a special country. So like to me, like exceptionalism breeds selfishness and malignant narcissism. And I think that when you see all these fits of people cussing out grocery store workers because they don't want to wear a mask to protect other people, this is the exceptionalism breeding selfishness and malignant narcissism that I'm talking about. Because these actions, which look small, are going to have long-lasting effects and impact our ability to have a functioning society for some time. And so, to me, this wolf thing is, we all grew up hearing these, like the mythological, tales that like underpin the United States, like special place, manifest destiny, exceptional nation, chosen, etc. And so we were all told, like, you're the big wolves in this world. You know, that's the way that so many people in this country were raised. And when you tell somebody that they're so important for their entire lives, they don't see it as a we, they see it as a me. And so that's one of my readings of this song as well, about the wolf.
I mean, that makes total sense. Divine providence. I mean, it's there at the heart of what we learn about American history and the founding of this country, that makes it seem, you know, like that idea of exceptionalism is interwoven into, you know, our founding and our memory. The bigger thing is really the memory. So that is completely different from my interpretation, but I totally dig it.
Isn't that amazing the way that works out?
Yeah, for
You
sure.
know, like we listened to like Cop Just Out of Frame a few weeks back, and we dug so deeply into the history of Vietnam. Take Quang Duc.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like a storyline that you can fact check, that you can dig deeply into from the amazing historical work that exists in that field. And with a song like this, that isn't there. So this is a totally different beast about talking about a song like this. You know what I mean?
And again, I think it's one of the reasons why I find it to be so special.
Yeah. So let's dive into the music a little bit.
Oh man.
Tell me about the what you learned about the guitars, or how you feel about the guitars on this song.
Oh, I don't know. Just right away, I think any any dad who just loves Rush, you know, would love that big, chonky, monstrous power riff in the beginning. It doesn't seem like an intro, right? Since none of the ideas or riffs repeat later on in the song. And I think it rather like establishes a larger theme or a feel in the song. So it's kind of more of like a mini overture, fitting a super proggy song that's 3 minutes and 18 seconds long. So rather than, you know, like you would almost expect it to go on for like 8 minutes.
Yeah, for real.
If it was like a, you know, legit prog band, but it lasts for maybe 20 seconds or so. And right away that grabs me.
Interesting. I love the multiple riffs that go on throughout this song as well. You know, there's you know, really shreddy stuff, but then there's also the like the do no 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 no, like that kind of big heavy riff that almost feels like the beginning that super heavy section of Night Letters as well. It harkens back to that really deep, chunky riff that, you know, almost reminds me of, you know, like Corrosion of Conformity riffs with Pepper Keenan. You know, so there's that slow riff as well that I really love.
A little sludgy.
Yeah, absolutely. What else? Did you find anything else out about the guitars?
So then it kind of like that big monstrous opening leads into a contrasting clean riff that I think just builds like and creates this amazing atmosphere and mood. Then during like the verse, again, we have that heavy, like the low, high, the heavy high that we talked about in Natural Disasters and Tertium. And I mean, we've mentioned it a couple times, but I really don't know if I can say that it happens in too many other songs. I think it might just be coincidence that that we've picked up that pattern. Later on, around 150 or so, there's that really super metallic, almost breakdown that makes you think it's going to be this big buildup that will cut out, but it doesn't. And right around like the 2 minute mark, it transitions again, and under what I guess is like the chorus, you know, Todd singing "When All Your Fears Collide."
Yeah.
You know, the guitars are in key, but they sound a little chaotic. There's like this kind of jagged, erratic, maybe uncomfortable feeling that you get from some of those riffs. But I think that totally, again, conceptually matches the lyrics to this song. And my favorite part, and it's super, super small, is around the 2 minute 30 seconds mark. when Todd is singing All Along They Made You Think, there's that sweet picking, and it's so gentle, and you almost have to see a video of it to see that it's actually sweet picking. And for me, listening to death metal, if someone sweet picks, it's the whole song, and it's just abrasive, and it's nonstop, and it's just, you know, in your headphones, and you know, just you know, it sounds like Morse code eventually. But to see it add so much texture, and I get like a visual of like a feather every time I hear that. That little touch is like my favorite part of this song, and it comes back to that metallic breakdown that before made you think it was going to build up and then just crash, and then the song kind of comes to a close. And I think they're just all these super unique parts that fit together to make the song really, really stand out.
Well, that is so well said. You know, one of the things that I was really focusing on is the drums in this song.
Sure.
And, you know, David and I kind of talked about it earlier, but to me, this song needs to be viewed in order to be appreciated on the drums, I think. I love watching Jord's arms during the beat, the driving part of the beat, because he's just independently throwing in so many accentuating cymbal hits, and it's the right cymbal every time. It's not like just hitting the cymbal for the right thing. Like, it actually like lends something to the moment. It expresses a subtlety on the drums. Like, he's got China hits on the off beats. He's got patterns of rhythm on the bell of the ride cymbal. And that's something my friend Jevin from Much the Same and I always talk about, is how much we like drummers who utilize the bell of the ride. And then he's got those massive stop starts, change on a dime tempos. He's leading the beat out of the breaks, like of the tempo changes, with a snare hit, as opposed to leading with the bass drum. So it feels like he's behind the beat and letting the riffs lead the song. And I just love it. So, you know, if you have like a fast beat, it's like boop bop boop bop boop bop boop bop boop bop boop bop. You're leading with the bass drum. But if you lead with the snare drum, like ba do 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 ba. So like whatever you're leading out with, it sets the tone for the beat. And so Jord is, you know, leading with the snare on this, but he's behind in it. And he, on the off beats, he's blasting that China. And it's so worth watching, because watching this made me love this song.
Yeah. It seems to me, not being a drummer, that the drums are actually doing two things at once. I feel like they're establishing rhythm, but they also seem to carry the melody here. They're really emphasizing the guitar, and when the guitar stops, like the drums mostly stop, and then they come back together synchronized in a way that makes this song like melodic and percussive at the same time, which seems almost contradictory.
Yeah, it's not like a song where there's just a driving beat.
Yeah.
It's all a part of it. It's all a part of the fabric. And like that's a really interesting way, like, of comparing and contrasting drummers, is seeing who is painting a picture with the drums and who is just driving the song with a beat. And, you know, like, do the parts fit the song, or is it just a beat the whole time? And another drummer that does that really well, who's just all over the place and playing with the guitars in so many ways, is the drummer from A Wilhelm Scream. Nick Angelini does a really good job about that as well. And his drumming is unlike anything I've seen in most other punk bands, who are just really just in that driving, you know, beat. But Nick plays on the drums what the guitars are playing as well. And I think that Jord is essentially interpreting the guitar lines on the drums as well. So like there's so much, you know, gelling between those instruments that it doesn't happen if you're just playing like a driving fast punk rock beat.
Oh, right. Yeah, for sure. This is way more prog, tipped in the prog scale, opposed to the punk scale.
Yeah. So to me, like, Jord is really, really special on this song. So tell me what you learned about this song. Like, what's like your big takeaway?
So if this song is in fact what I think it's about or how I interpret it, then I say the lesson is we, especially the United States, have ignored these, ideological threats, whether they're, far right, race-based ideological groups for at least the last 40 years. Again, grab a copy of Kathleen Bellew's Bring the War Home, and refusing to see militant groups as threats, allowing them to disappear into the underground, to infiltrate mainstream news outlets, to normalize nationalist language and rhetoric. And if the song isn't about that, I still see it as a warning of what happens when there's a lack of empathy, a lack of education, and a lack of humanity when humanity isn't valued.
Yeah, so for me, I feel like we're living in such a dumb timeline with regards to so much. It's like overwhelming, like how I feel like we're just obsessed with just dissent.
Yeah.
Pandemic, we keep attempting to give equal weight to all sides of an argument, even though like a specific side of an argument is clearly regressive and not the direction that humanity is moving in. Which David spoke succinctly about whenever he said, no more of that. I feel like we're just ignorant of climate catastrophe. We're ignoring scientific experts, and instead, an easy way to get out of having an actual substantive conversation based on actual information is to say, oh, the sheeple are doing X, Y, Z. And that just makes me crazy, and it's all the way to go. The day that you're like, and we're going to do that. We're going to say sheeple all the way to the day that you're fumbling your keys to the door, like is being described in this song. And then we will watch the rise over ruin.
I like that, man. That's really solid.
So, did you find any good YouTube comments about this song?
This really matches how I was describing it musically. One says, prog punk. Love this band. How to Clean Everything was my jam. Wow, these guys have grown.
Concur with that wholeheartedly.
Yeah, for sure.
What else?
How about Winnipeg Math Punk City?
Oh, tight.
Another great album that has me once again questioning the ethics of every choice I make.
Ooh, well said.
I feel that.
Yeah. Go ahead and rate this bad boy.
I'm giving When All Your Fears Collide a 4 out of 5. Lyrically, it's descriptive and literary while still being a little bit enigmatic. It's relevant however you want to interpret it. I love Todd's vocals here as he sings with, I think, far more confidence, emotion, and maturity. And musically, it just has a ton of great complex parts that fit all together in, basically a prog song.
Yeah.
What about you?
I'm going to give it a 3. I like it a lot. It's an impressive track, but if I saw the band live and they didn't play it, I wouldn't forget that they hadn't played it. Do you know what I mean? Like I wouldn't walk out at the end of the night saying, I can't believe they didn't play When All Your Fears Collide. That said, I have not seen this song live. And for me, seeing a song live takes it to a new level. So I'm imagining if I was up against the stage, being like right under Todd and being able to have Jord in front of me, doing all that amazing drumming like I was just describing, and then seeing Sue Lynn and Chris over there being super busy, like they are. There's not a moment to rest on this song. And so I think that I would like it more if I'd seen it live. But for now, since I've only heard it recorded, I'm just going to go with my 3.
Play it live.
Yes, exactly. That'll change my mind. Thank you so much for listening to Unscripted Moments, a podcast about propaganda. This has been a fantastic chat on When All Your Fears Collide. Thank you so much to David Anthony for coming on the show. It was awesome to have you. Everybody go check out David's work. If you want to hit us up, you can find us on Twitter at PropagandyPod, and you can find us on Instagram at PropagandyPod. Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you next time.